The Dark Age, honestly, looks like the most boring age. It's literally dark, with most of the map hidden. Players spend most of their time struggling just to get resources, let alone build up a base, and there's not many opportunities to fight the opponent. A lot of other strategy games speed up or even skip this stage. But if you know what to look for, there's a lot going on in the Dark Age. Small but meaningful choices that have exponential impacts on the way the game plays out. A usual Dark Age start looks like this: a town center, 3 villagers, and a scout isolated in an unexplored map. As spectators, we see their start like this, but it's important to keep in mind how little of the map a player can see, and how much of their decision-making is influenced by their scout's first moves. Players have 4 basic goals to accomplish in Dark Age. Continuously produce villagers, scout the map for resources and opponents, collect 500 food to reach the Feudal Age, and prepare for the next age. Let's go through these point by point. The first thing you'll see players do, almost every game, is make 2 houses, then send their first 6 villagers to food. This is to ensure constant villager production. Houses increase a player's population limit, while, as a rule of thumb, it takes 6 villagers gathering food to keep a town center consistently producing villagers. If you're watching a high-level game, it's going to be rare for a player to ever have their town center not working in Dark Age. But even very good players can make mistakes and leave their town center idle. Idle time might seem harmless, but it can add up. Remember that a villager can be created in 25 seconds. So every 25 seconds of TC idle time, a player has effectively lost a villager. In Dark Age, that single villager constitutes a huge chunk of a player's economy, so it really matters. In intermediate or lower games, idle time can come from a number of sources. Forgetting to make a house and being at your population limit is pretty common, or being distracted while luring a boar or managing a scout. You can track idle TC time here in Capture Age. Now, while villagers are building houses and gathering food, the scout is busy right away too. They need to find several things as quickly as possible. More sheep, a good chunk of trees, the 2 boar near the player's base, and sources of gold and stone. Players with build orders count on finding these things at specific villager numbers. For instance, a player's 7th villager generally goes and builds a lumber camp on a player's wood line, and a few villagers later, a player sends someone to lure a boar back to their town center for a huge boost in food. Finding these even slightly late can really complicate an economy. Beyond that, the scout needs to find the enemy's base. Aggressive players want to find exposed resources that could be easy to attack, while defensive players want to spot an early barracks to warn them of a possible rush. The scout has to be careful around the enemy town center though. An attentive player can garrison their villagers to shoot and kill an enemy scout, and anyone who loses a scout is playing blind. While players can automate scouting with the auto scout button, it's not very intelligent, and usually just goes to the right corner of the map first. A player who auto scouts risks missing early resources, and will find their opponent slower than an experienced player would. As a side note, something you'll probably see in higher level games is the scout pushing deer under a player's town center. Deer, unlike boar, run away from humans, making them hard to hunt efficiently, but carefully chasing a deer with a scout can lead it to a safe and efficient spot near the TC. This is an advanced technique that gives a small resource advantage, but does delay scouting the enemy, so it can be greedy too. I have seen a lot of mid-level games where a deer pusher never scouts the enemy and loses to an early rush they didn't know about. Though players send a few villagers to wood for buildings, the focus of every player in Dark Age is on food, and not just for villagers. 500 food is needed to advance to Feudal Age, and balancing producing villagers and saving up can be tricky. While idling a TC and going up to Feudal with as little as 12 or 13 villagers is possible, it cripples an economy, and there's very little that player could do once they got to Feudal. For this reason, players only advance to Feudal Age once they have the villager count to accomplish something. Now this can vary wildly with strategy and with skill level. A scout rush can advance with as few as 18 villagers, while fast castle builds commonly have up to 26 before they advance. Advancing to Feudal Age uses your town center for 130 seconds, which is the equivalent of giving up 5 villagers while advancing. As a general rule, assuming similar idle TC times, the player who advances later has a stronger economy, because they have more villagers earlier, while the player who advances first has a stronger military, because they have access to military units earlier. One wrinkle to this rule is the Dark Age Rush, or Drush, where a player builds an early barracks and creates militia units to attack their opponent. Even in Dark Age, militia are expensive, and spending food on them delays a player's Feudal Age advance. They're also weak and unlikely to kill villagers against skilled opponents. Their strength, though, is in annoying and stalling the opponent. Often, even this small attack can keep an opponent focused on their side of the map long enough that the Drusher can advance late without being attacked. During the 130 seconds a player is advancing to Feudal, a lot shifts around. Players move some villagers off of food and gather more wood to afford farms, gold to afford archers or castle age, or even stone to afford towers or castles. A player looking to attack with archers or scouts needs a barracks first, so they often make one while advancing. Palisade walls often come up to protect from attack, and sometimes villagers even come forward aggressively. After a player clicks on Feudal Age, watch what their villagers do to predict their ongoing strategy. Next, we're going to talk about Feudal, where things get really messy. I also want to say thank you for all the great interest and feedback on the last video. I really appreciate it.